Hello, exclamation point. I'm interested in alternative hypotheses about the PS5 power saving mode. There's something fishy about the idea of a 100-watt mode being relevant for a handheld machine. We'll talk about that shortly. Consider the recent rumor that the PS Portal will soon play games via the cloud, i.e., you won't need to own a PS5 to play the Portal. So maybe the point is for Sony's cloud streaming services to use PS5s running the power saver mode. This will be similar to what Xbox does. Their cloud gaming uses the Series X hardware running the Series S version of the game. This sounds somewhat believable to me, but the question is why the mode would be enabled on consumer devices. All the best, Glenn. I'm going to quickly tackle this one. First of all, let's talk about the 100-watt mode being relevant for a handheld machine. I'm literally at this moment got our automated benchmarking system benchmarking a ROG Ally X, not the Xbox one, the preceding one, and it's running in handheld mode. It's running in portable mode. It's not plugged in. The APU is set to 25 watt TDP. However, the battery draw is showing 42 watts. So 42 watts entire system draw is happening there for an APU running at 25 watts, right? Now, the thing to bear in mind with the new presumed handheld is that it is running on a new GPU architecture, presumably via some sort of ISA backcompat. But crucially, it's going to be on a much more efficient process node. So when you're looking at the PlayStation 5 running these power saver mode games at 100 watts, like for like on a prospective handheld, the power draw will be much, much lower. And, 40 to 50 watts is conceivable, but it's probably conceivable for a docks mode, right? So, if there have been rumors that the handheld will also run docked. If it's plugged in, it basically has access to unlimited power. You can run the APU at much higher power draw, much higher, and therefore much higher clocks, better performance, etc. So maybe that is what the power saver mode is doing, a prospective sort of docked configuration. And then there'll be a lower mode, possibly a 15 watt APU mode that would be running at 1080p rather than 1440p as we've seen from PowerSaver. Just a theory, but I was talking about that the other day with the Forks, the handheld specialist. That was kind of like his thoughts on that as well. The cloud thing kind of makes sense in the developer documentation for the power saver mode. It does talk about how it's got to run on the cloud. The question there is that a lot of these games are now taking 60 FPS modes and running them at 30, which actually introduces a lot of latency, which isn't great for the cloud experience. So, possibly, but it's also not mandatory. Developers don't have to support it. So in those modes, it's still going to be the full 200 odd watt experience that's going to be streamed to you. That's my thoughts on it at the moment. The question is why the mode would be enabled on consumer devices. Well, if the work is going in for whatever reason, you can present your green credentials, right? Even if very few people are going to be using it, the fact is it's there and it is laudable. Oliver, what do you make of all of this?
Yeah, I certainly think on the handheld side of things that new process technologies are going to save you there. And in particular, when you look at when you look at the kind of limitations that you might experience on a PS6 handheld, on a handheld next generation PlayStation, I think in terms of GPU compute, it's going to be a lot closer to a PS5 than it will be in terms of bandwidth, than it will be in terms of CPU configuration necessarily, in terms of having that full 8-core allocation that will have like a 4+2 allocation or something like that, with the 2 being low power cores and maybe the rest being Zen 6C cores. I think that does really strongly resemble the lineup of compromises that Sony has made for the low power mode. So I think it just makes a lot of sense. That would be kind of a proving ground for developers to get to grips with the realities of shipping a game on a reduced capability hardware, like you've mentioned many times. In terms of the cloud issue, I agree. The fact that you're shipping a game at 30 FPS, in many cases in these low power modes, does not really suggest a very fruitful future in a streamed experience. And I'd also think that, saving, maybe if you're in a relatively inexpensive area for power, you might only be saving about a cent or maybe 2 cents per hour of gameplay streamed if you actually do run that hardware at 100 watts instead of 200 watts. I could see it having more of a role if they were able to have specialty server hardware or some kind of commodity hardware perhaps based off of the handheld hardware that could run that software in a more area efficient manner
Right.
using these low power modes. That will be one potential in order to save some money, just like Microsoft does with their kind of Series X hardware running to Series S's. That would certainly be one avenue they could go down. But at the moment, I do think that low power mode is a little bit questionable, but I think the thing that makes the most sense is that it is a proving ground for the next generation handheld, but it doesn't directly map on to necessarily any particular mode that the handheld might run. Although I would imagine, given that it's binary compatible, it can probably run those handheld modes, those low power saving modes, but I don't think they're practical for the device.
Mm-hmm. John, any thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I was thinking about this. If let's say you've got huge numbers of people playing forever games like Fortnite, Rocket League, whatever on a PlayStation. If those games, for instance, were to default to like a power save mode across like millions and millions of players, there's something to be said for some power savings or like some kind of small impact on the overall footprint that the PS5 leaves, right? Because in most of these cases, people playing them, you're not going to need the full power of the system to enjoy them anyway. So I could see a point where it's like mass adoption of a power saver mode being useful for those types of games. Beyond that, though, I mean, everything else you've kind of theorized, I kind of agree with. I see it.